Welcome back to DAGryffyn Hobby. My name's Dave. What would happen if I tore this layout down and started over? What if I tore this layout down and started over? What would I do? How would I do it differently? There are so many possibilities, it's hard to know where to even start. But no, I am not tearing this layout down. I haven't made nearly enough mistakes yet to justify a new layout. There's definitely stuff I would do different, but I'm not quite at the spot yet where it needs to be redone. Besides, I still have a lot of work I want to do. I've been kicking around the garage this morning trying to find direction and inspiration, and I was just cleaning and poking and prodding and running some trains. And I was thinking, what would I do if I started over? There are some obvious answers. Ones that I really wouldn't have to think about twice. One, larger diameter turns. Currently the outer loop is 54 and the inner loop is 42. Also, the upper loop is also a minimum of 42. The upper loop, however, is 042 and 027. It's kind of a hodgepodge of leftover track. I don't know that I would need to go to any huge diameter turns, but I kind of feel like at this point you should always go with the largest turns that you can fit in your space. If not to allow larger and more scale equipment to go around them, but just for the fact that the trains kind of look better going around a wider turn. Maybe that's because I spent a lot of time messing with HO and N scale that I feel a nice wide swooping turn would be more appealing than the standard 036 or 031 or even the 027 that I started with. I look back to that and that was like watching a train highball towards a right angled 90-degree turn without slowing down. And that was always very jarring to me. Now 054 is fantastic. It really allows me to run pretty much anything I'm going to run. My only concern is that maybe with larger turns, some of those locomotives that I have would just roll smoother around those turns and look a little better. Certainly the larger passenger cars would look better on larger diameter turns. When I started this layout, the maximum diameter was 042. And then it wasn't until later when I decided to get the Menards track that I said, you know what, let me squeeze in the 54. I'll have to do a little modification, but not much. And I'm so glad I did. As I'm planning this expansion to the other side of the layout, I was thinking, can I redo the outer loop to be whatever the next step is in Menards track, if it's 72 or whatever, I don't remember, 76, I have no idea. But whatever that is, could I work that into this current layout? And for most of the spots, I probably could, but the end down here with the tunnels and everything, I would have to really change the entire end of the layout, and that's not something I'm willing to do. So the expansion will have the larger turns, but that's going to be just because it's visually pleasing, and I kind of want to do it. It's not going to allow me to run things that I can't already run, but I think it will look really nice on a large open space to see those trains kind of swoop around the 070, whatever, or 090, whatever I can fit in the space. The second thing for me is really a planning visualization kind of a thing. I could not really visualize this layout in 3 dimensions when I was designing it. I laid out the track plan in AnyRail, and that was a huge help. And I would definitely do that again. I wouldn't make any changes to any layout without using software at this point, just because it gives you a way to fiddle around with things quite easily and quickly and to see how different ideas would pan out. If you watched Zach's video from Country Bunker on his new section of his layout, he had mentioned that he's just hands-on and wants to lay this stuff out on the floor to figure out where the truck's gonna go, and I totally agree with that. I just like to do the step of the software first, and then I can't take a step forward without laying it all out. So like this layout that I have now, I laid it all out on the floor before I started building the benchwork. I think though that I need to get better at the software and visualize the layout in 3 dimensions and see how upper loops will cross over the lower loops and how everything can fit together, because once I did the lower 2 loops and started working on the upper, I ran into so many problems with how do I support this track? How do I want it to look? I didn't want it to just all be on trestles, so I had to figure out how to support it without totally obscuring the lower track. So the second lesson for me is planning. I got to do a lot more planning, and hopefully after building this layout, I'll be better able to visualize it in a 3-dimensional concept instead of just, looking straight down on it. The software can generate a 3-dimensional image, but it didn't matter because my brain just didn't work that way. One of the design parameters I put in place for this layout was that I needed to reach everything. That's because the layout before this was 3 sheets of 4x8 plywood, and by the time that came down, I couldn't get around it, I couldn't reach over it, and it wasn't sturdy enough to climb on top of it. So when I designed this layout, I said I want it to be no more than 3 feet deep in the spots where it's against the wall, so that I could easily reach to the back of it. Another thing as far as the space is, I wanted to have this section of the room in the middle open so that I could do other things in this room. I wanted space to move around, maybe put an easy chair so I could watch TV and whatnot out here. I didn't want it to be completely filled with train layout. I'm glad I did it that way, but I feel like it's been very limiting. I've got a 20-something foot stretch to the left of me that's only 3 feet deep. And it's how much can you do with those 3 feet? I've got the 2 loops, and then in the middle are the 2, fake yard tracks that I put in there. And there's just not much else that you can fit. So while I designed the layout so that I could reach everything and I didn't have to crawl under or climb on top of, I think I might need to alter that for the next one. One example would be the end over here where I've got the loops at the end of the layout. If I want larger radius turns, I'm going to have to be able to get under it. So I might just have to design it in such a way that I can have a cutout in the middle and come up from underneath to get at it. So while ideally I would like to be able to reach to everything from the middle, it's just very limiting when it comes to fitting things into your layout. Since I knew I didn't want to struggle to get under the layout, the bottom edge of the table is at 37 inches, which puts the top of the rail of the outer loop at about 43 inches. So when I do have to get under there, it's really not that bad. So if I built a different layout this height with a cutout in the middle to come up under, I think it would be okay, because I'd probably be able to sit on a little stool with wheels and roll myself under there and then just stand up where I needed to be. This is a big one for me, and for this layout, I don't think I would use as much foam. I'm still really enjoying the construction of this layout and the ease that the foam allows, but I would really like to be able to plan the next layout to the extent that I could do more of an open grid setup, have all the tracks roadbed mount to plywood or whatever sub roadbed just under it and just support that, and then I would have everything be open other than that. Then I could fill any of the spaces I needed to with foam structures or whatever type of landscape I wanted to do. I think it would enable me to have a little more freedom as far as designing the landscape. Part of the issue now is that the track rests on top of the foam, so it's a little harder to do something crazy with it. I can't cut it away in sections where it supports the track. So I think if the track itself were supported on risers and plywood, sub roadbed, and they were all independent of the landscape, that would really make it a lot easier to do some of the more grand things that I had planned. Another thing about the surface of the foam is that it's not perfectly flat. While it provides a pretty decently solid base for the track, there are a couple of places where the irregularity has caused a little bit of an issue. But nothing that affects the running of the trains. Everything runs great. So at this point, I think it's just me being a little picky. One of the places I think the open grid as opposed to a foam tabletop would help is over by the train station and the small river. it would be easier to cut that all away and shape it without having to worry about the fact that the track is resting on that foam. I'm starting to think planning your wiring is just as important as planning your track layout. You need to know how you're going to hook everything up to do it efficiently. I don't have that many things hooked up, and still I have wires everywhere. And it's one of those messes that is going to make it very hard to troubleshoot things or to change things. So I would like to do something a little more structured and organized next time. I'm still wiring this one, and I'll probably rip out some of the wiring that's already there. I think I really should have drops every 6 feet and stick to that, especially in tough to reach spots, because if I've got a tough to reach spot that I don't have a drop for that section and it gets dirty, it's going to be a real pain to deal with. As much as I like not having switches on this layout, and the fact that I have pretty much 0 derailments because I don't have any engines stumbling over any tracks, I still think I need to work some in. Maybe if I were to duplicate this layout and start over, I would have the 2 loops connected by a switch, but I wouldn't want more than 1 or 2 switches on each main line. I don't want the engines clanking over them and banging over them and shaking as they go over. I want them running smooth. If I have 1 switch off of each main line to some sort of yard where I can move things around, or even just store trains so I don't have to take everything off the track every time, that would be fantastic. Again, it's not important enough to me now to make that change to this layout, but I think I would do a little bit more planning for that next time. When I started this layout, I really wanted to have a siding that went down below under the layout where I could store a bunch of trains. And I've got the space under the layout. Sure, it would have really complicated the build and the wiring and everything else, but man, that would be so awesome if I could just have all my trains on sidings under the layout. I wouldn't even have to have a yard on the layout if I didn't want it, because everything would still be on the track. So that would make the layout a lot more complicated. And really, when I was building this, I was concerned about simple and cost effectiveness, which is also why I used the Menards track. I would love something like, Ross and Gargraves, but that would have just multiplied the cost of this layout by so much. And at the time, I really didn't know if I was going to keep working on it. So the Menards track was a budget decision, but also I guess I wasn't really committed at the time to really getting into this as much as I really have. Something that's not directly related to the layout is the room in which the layout is in. And I did a lot of work to this room to get it ready to use as some sort of livable space. It was a mess in here. This is a very old garage, and concrete block walls and the joists in the ceiling are really widely spaced, and the boards upstairs are tongue and groove and all separated, so dirt would just fall through them into the room down here. I did a lot of work to this room to get it usable, but I really could have done more. This goes back to not really being sure that I was going to continue doing this, because it was, early pandemic. I was home, I needed something to work on, and I had been playing with the trains but wasn't into it that much because I've always had a lot of different hobbies. But since I've gotten into the trains and started doing the channel, I've really only focused on my trains, which has been extremely rewarding. But at the beginning, I didn't know really what I was going to be doing, so I didn't really want to commit a large amount of money to the room. But if I were to start over, I would definitely frame out the exterior walls with probably the foam board against the concrete, then the 2x4s, and then insulation in between them, and run outlets against all of that, and do it in a much nicer way than I did on the center wall. Because that I threw up and I used thin paneling and all that, so I would put the effort in to really make the room quite a bit nicer. Maybe even pour down self-leveling concrete on this floor, because this floor in here is kind of nasty. So when it comes time to do another layout, this room is going to get gutted again. Everything is going to come out, and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to frame out these walls behind me, and I'm going to insulate them, and it will be so much nicer. Also, that wall in the center, I might push back another 10 feet or so to give myself more space. So that will be fantastic. and add heat and air conditioning and all this. Ooh, a heated floor would be fantastic. I gotta look into that. I could probably sit here and nitpick for the next 3 hours about what I have done and what I would do differently, but at this point, I don't think that's going to be beneficial. I'm really happy with my layout and the space in here. I'm very fortunate to have had this space and this time to work on all of this. So don't think I'm complaining. I am thrilled to have what I have. And I do love my layout. I'm going to keep working on it until it's more or less done. The day I come in here and say it's done, it's probably the day that all comes down, but hopefully I don't say it anytime soon. But I am thrilled with this space and this layout and all that I've done over the last couple of years, not just in the hobby, but also with the channel. It's all been extremely rewarding. I just like to look at what I would do differently and keep those things in mind so that the next time I do something, I can learn from what I've done and maybe do it a little better. Even though I would make changes to the way the layout's built, I love the foam. It's been great. I want to add a space, I throw some foam up. I want to take something down, I just cut it out, rip it off. Doesn't matter. There's always the support under it. It's not like I'm going to cut into a mountain and there's going to be a huge empty space, as there would be if I was doing a screen and paper mache mountain. This mountain behind me, I can carve into that quite a ways, and it's not going to really affect the overall structure of it. I think it's time for me to stop talking and to get back to work, because I was really enjoying myself fiddling around out here. Came up with a new little scene or two that I'm really excited about. I wasn't inspired earlier today, and now I am. I'm gonna get back to work, and hopefully I'll have some more updates for you real soon. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on DAGryffyn Hobby.